Hello, I'm Dr. Scott Wadier.
And I'm Tommy Welling, and you're listening to the Fasting for Life podcast.
This podcast is about using fasting as a tool to regain your health, achieve ultimate wellness, and live the life you truly deserve.
Each episode is a short conversation on a single topic with immediate actionable steps. We cover everything from fat loss and health and wellness to the science of lifestyle design.
We started Fasting for Life because of how fasting has transformed our lives, and we hope to share the tools that we have learned along the way. Hey everyone, welcome to the Fasting for Life podcast. My name is Dr. Scott Wadier, and I'm here, as always, with my good friend and colleague, Tommy Welling. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Hey, Scott, how are you?
Fantastic, my friend. Excited for today's conversation. This is going to be an actionable one, and it's also one that is near and dear to my heart and my fasting lifestyle journey. So we're going to talk about the relationship between sleep and weight loss. In our opinion, one of the most underserved things when it comes to adopting a fasting lifestyle, trying to lose weight, get healthy, especially in today's fast-paced, distracted world that we live in today. So we're going to deep dive into sleep and weight loss. We'll talk about the physiology. We'll talk about some action steps on how you can prioritize your sleep and why it is so vitally important for a healthy weight loss and maintenance journey. So if you're new to the podcast, welcome in. Thanks for giving us a shot. If you want to know more about myself, more about Tommy and our journey with fasting, head back to episode 0, episode 1. Give it a listen. That'll give you a little insight into how fasting transformed our lives, but more importantly, why we do what we do week in and week out with the podcast. Going on 280 episodes plus now, year 5. Still can't believe we're doing it. So grateful for each and every one of you that listen in as long-term listeners. We are on this fasting lifestyle journey with you. We appreciate all the likes, the subscribes, the reviews, especially the 5-star kind. We are biased, but we're grateful for all of those as well.
Love them.
So the reason why we do this week in and week out and why we have our resources and our challenges, because we want to help you create a sustainable plan. And we want to create a lifestyle that doesn't always feel like you're trying to lose or trying to maintain. And it can be easier because fasting is such a powerful tool, and that is the vehicle that has created so many amazing results and testimonies for us in our personal lives, but also with the folks that we've helped, you guys, the listeners. So today's episode, Tommy, let's dive into it. And I'll kind of set the stage here just by kind of, addressing the elephant in the room. Poor or limited sleep can drive metabolic dysfunction and make healthy weight management and loss more difficult through a whole host of different mechanisms. So let's start framing out what the lack of sleep does, metabolically speaking, why then it makes it more difficult to stay consistent with fasting, and then we'll talk about a couple of instances where we feel this is being dropped in terms of the plan and the strategy and why we focus on it an entire day, day 6 in our 7-day challenges, where we focus on this an entire day and why we've created resources around prioritizing sleep.
Yeah, because if you think about, let's say, thermodynamics, calories in, calories out, if you just think about diet, energy intake, energy balance, weight loss, fat loss, in terms of that, you could see changes just from 1 or 2 nights of poor sleep or suboptimal sleep. You can see changes on the calories inside and the calories outside. So essentially what I mean is that reduced sleep and sleep efficiency leads to changes in leptin and ghrelin, our hunger and satiety hormones, and also then that affects cravings, food choices, and what actually ends up on your plate on average, especially as sleep deprivation or lack of sleep quality continues. And then you also see a metabolic reduction, a metabolic inefficiency that comes in the form of short-term insulin resistance and lower insulin sensitivity. So these are problems on the front end, problems on the back end that then lead to even just a short term. You can see small additional visceral fat depositions that happen just in a matter of days. It's very, very small, but they do add up over time. That's the point. Yep. And that you also see additional subcutaneous fat stores, and you see in a caloric deficit, you see fat loss, the rate of fat loss slow down dramatically. And it doesn't take very long. So you can take those very, very short-term effects, start to extrapolate them over lifestyle, over months to years, which a lot of us that do suffer from sleep issues or, lifestyles are busy, things like that, wearing lack of sleep, being able to stay productive as a badge of honor. I used to do that for sure. We don't necessarily make big sweeping changes to those, but at the same time, we could be feeling like we're doing everything right on the diet, exercise part of the equation, and then not understanding why the results aren't matching our expectations.
And the research is really clear on this. So this is a personal thing to me, something that has been a driver of my underlying insulin resistance over the years, which thankfully I now adopt a fasting lifestyle. My fasting insulin's in check. My labs are good. Lost the weight, working on the last few remaining pounds of visceral fat. But the reality is that, like, what's the boundary for sleep? Because the pushback we get on this, and I'm not throwing stones from a glass house. Like, this is something my wife and I talk about often, and it's a daily struggle with sleep and the busyness of the lives that we live. So let's just address the elephant in the room: sleep deprivation. And we're not talking about some of the studies that show, 4.5 hours of sleep for 4 nights, that affect some of the leptin and ghrelin that you already mentioned. But that in those studies, you consume up to 300 to 500 more calories that next day, and your blood sugar is all out of whack, et cetera, et cetera. And those small changes day to day that end up leading to metabolic dysfunction or metabolic disruption and disease processes long term.
Right.
But the reality is, if we look at frontline workers, and we've done an entire episode on this, shift workers, they have a severe increase in cardiometabolic issues because of that disruption of sleep. So we know it's real. Why is it so hard? Sleep science, like, if you want to be proven, like, if you want to go look, there is no dissension. There's no arguing on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah.
It is clear as day, and this was something that was hard for me to digest as like you mentioned, wearing no sleep as a badge of honor. My dad used to get up at 2:30 in the morning, open the store. He worked in those shifts, and guess what? He was a multi-decade diabetic until he started a fasting lifestyle, came off all of his medications, reversed his diabetes, came off 120 units of insulin. So he was so I followed in his footsteps. It was like, sleep when you're dead. I was always the crammer through over the night. I worked in the restaurant business for years. So I always wore lack of sleep and being able to function as a badge of honor. So I get it from a standpoint, with 6 kids between us and 5 dogs and multiple businesses. We have a horse and family and work and clinic and all of the things. Like, the reality is that it has to become a priority at some point for you to have consistent weight loss and health efforts.
Yeah.
If we just pretend it's not a problem, that's when we ultimately create the problem.
Okay.
And you already mentioned it. That's where we're going to be. And Mayo Clinic says this: the connection of sleep loss to the accumulation of the worst fat that we want, which is the abdominal fat. It's an 11% increase in visceral fat accumulation. So we have to first accept that prioritizing your sleep is a daily thing. It doesn't happen by accident. And we'll talk about it the second half of today's conversation about some of the action steps you can do to prioritize those sleep efforts. And because good sleep starts the morning before and the night before, not just going to bed when your little reminder on your phone says, hey, stop scrolling and go to sleep.
Sure.
Or, hey, the kids are in bed. Oh, man, it'd be really nice to veg out and watch Netflix for a while or read a book or get some additional work done. So, by the way, this is me in real life, day to day. It's like, no. We prioritize sleep in this family. Sleep for our kids is incredibly important in terms of brain development, learning, growth, etc. So we're teaching them these sleep principles now by the routines and the systems that we have in place. But it's a constant thing. So the elephant in the room is that if you don't prioritize sleep, it is going to make the efforts that you do on a day-to-day basis when it comes to fasting and food choices and and health and longevity that much more difficult. There's no other way to get around it. It is truly what it is what it is, and we need to figure out a way to prioritize that, most importantly, because if you are doing all of the right things and the needle's not moving and you're struggling with losing, gaining, or or getting to your goal, but then regaining most of it or plus some, this is a key lever that we need to focus on for long-term results and long-term sustainability, because pushing the boulder up the hill is only going to last for so long.
Absolutely. And fasting and sleep, they go hand in hand. So they work together, or they work to oppose each other depending on
I love
day,
this.
right? Depending on the day, or depending on your deliberate intentions. Okay. And so this isn't to say this. I definitely don't want to imply that I think that everyone has full control over every night's sleep. 100%.
Oh no, we've got 3 dogs and 3 kids. There's a random occurrence of a thunderstorm coming through and somebody waking up.
Right. 4th of July, right around the corner. That's going to be a mess for probably, a week or so for a lot of us with little ones. But, the understanding how they work together, I think is a very, very important understanding, acknowledgement, just because if you're literally starting at zero, like if you never prioritize sleep because you can't, or you won't, or you don't want to, or you don't know why it's important, then you can start with just 1 or 2 nights a week where you go, okay, you know what? Let me just try that on for size. Let me see how I feel if I'm just deliberate about my sleep just a couple of times this week. And not to jump ahead on an action step, but the reason why I say that is because if you think about your fasting willpower, your fasting muscle, the strength of your fasting muscle on any given day, it will be much stronger if your sleep was good the night before. If your sleep was bad, if you had poor sleep the night before or not enough, it's just going to be harder. When you come face to face with the pantry or an opportunity or the fridge or midway through your fasting timer, it's just going to be tougher to continue to say no or not right now to breaking that fast early. It just period. Wherever you're starting from, it's going to be harder. It's going to take more willpower. So guess what? Willpower is finite. We talk about that all the time. So then you just add that up over time. So even if you're able to successfully complete that fast, great. Was the physiological benefit as much? No, it wasn't, because your body wasn't operating as efficiently. So if you did burn through some long-term fat stores, you may have burned up to 45% less of those long-term fat stores than you should have if you were in a more metabolically efficient state with better rest. That's just the facts.
Yep.
It's just the facts, okay, right? So your efforts didn't go as far as they should have. That stinks. Let's do less of that so our efforts go much farther. But then just the fact of the matter is that, fasting can also be sleep disturbing. So understanding that and going, well, when I tap
hold on.
into
In the initially, the first few times you go to bed, right? When you're going to sleep without food, or it's been a full burn day, or you're doing a 3-day fast for the first time, that's typically where we see that little stress response, and the body's not going to rest as well as it should because it's not used to flipping on and off that light switch.
True.
Right? But long term, fasting is going to inherently allow your body to get better rest.
Oh, yeah.
And burn more fat throughout the night.
Yeah, I didn't get good rest ever until I started consistently fasting.
Just this past week. Over the weekend, busy weekend, night away with my wife, hotel bed sucked, slept like crap, was hoping for a nice restful evening, came home, busy, summer's in full swing. So I said to my wife yesterday, she was like, hey, I'm making your favorite chicken thigh recipe. And I was like, because I saw 2 packs of chicken out on the counter, and I was like, I'm not eating tonight. And she's like, oh. Okay. And she's like, can I ask why? I'm like, yeah, because my sleep's been off for the last 4 nights. I need a green recovery on my Whoop. I need a good night of sleep. I can feel my body kind of down regulating and my cravings going up and my mood changing. And I'm like, so for me, when I fast and I don't eat those burn days, I now get the best sleep of my life on those nights, barring any random occurring event.
Right.
But even if I do get woken up, I'm able to go back to sleep, and my Whoop tells me the next day, hey, you got restorative sleep, you worked on your sleep, that good job. But in the beginning, yeah, to your point, fasting can definitely alter the sleep, but they do work hand in hand in terms of long-term sustainability.
I love that you brought up like going through that dinner, like saying no to a dinner, and then that being very, very helpful and protective of your sleep. You know that with hundreds and even thousands of reps of experience now, but that can feel a little bit like, I mean, that's a new tool if you haven't been building that and kind of getting some intuitive feedback from it
Yep.
just based on your experience. But one last thing about how fasting and your eating patterns can.
Fasting and sleep, right?
Yeah, so fasting and sleep, sorry. Late night eating. What I was thinking about was late night eating,
Yep.
which is so problematic, right? For your physiology, for your caloric intake, for your energy balance, but then for your blood sugar and insulin control. Those are really in opposition with each other, if you will, because late night snacking makes it harder to effectively fast the next day. But then that late night snacking also makes it very difficult for you to get quality rest because your body is like, it's like it's fighting the need to do something with this food that you brought in. You don't
Yeah.
have a
It
chance to
has to
burn
burn
through
that
it.
energy, store that energy,
Yeah.
digest that energy. Yeah.
If you've ever worn a continuous glucose monitor and seen what happens to your blood sugar overnight when you have a late night carbohydrate rich snack, because let's face it, how often are your late night snacks like protein rich? But even if they are, it's going to cause some disturbances. But where the real disturbances come in is like a high fat, high carbohydrate late night snack. It's disastrous.
Yep.
And so you talk about a red recovery on your Whoop. You talk about those big red spikes on your continuous glucose monitor. They are absolutely leaving clues behind as to what happened. And so that's in direct opposition. Then it's really tough the next day, even the day after that can be very, very tough as far as your fasting lifestyle, because sometimes when we make decisions like that, it really feels like, okay, now I just need a longer fast so I can kind of rip that Band-Aid off and kind of feel back on track. It's very tough to get through those because of cravings, blood sugar imbalances, and insulin swings that happen because of those things with those late night snacks and those poor sleep.
And that's the environment I grew up in. It was always dinner and then some chips or some ice cream or,
Yep.
that was the environment I grew up in. Now in this house, nothing good happens after 8 o'clock. So we have dinner and then the pantry and the kitchen closes at 8. If the kids want something, they can get some fruit, they can get a cheese stick, but we're staying out of that snacky like environment. Cause I mean, that is all part of it. So
Yep.
I want to make sure I might have buried the lead here, but what's the minimum amount of sleep that we want to be shooting for? And I'm going to say this, and some of you are going to go, oh, crap. 7 hours.
7. Yeah.
Women, you need a little bit more than men for proper hormone function. Not a lot, but about 15 to 20 minutes a night. So I help my wife prioritize her sleep because if she's good, we're good as a family.
Sure.
It just makes it that much easier.
Yeah.
We, as men, in our hormonal cycles, the 24-hour cycle, can handle less sleep better in the short term, right? However, you mentioned earlier knowing the why behind its importance. So before we talk about the application, I want to go over just a couple of the things that directly happen with getting consistent sleep less than 7 hours. You already mentioned it earlier, Tommy, leptin and ghrelin. So sleep deprivation, you're not getting enough sleep, you're fatigued. What happens in a fatigue state? Well, leptin and ghrelin go crazy. Leptin's your satiation hormone and ghrelin is your hunger hormone. You have more opportunity to eat in those late night snacky windows that you just mentioned. You have a decrease in your thermoregulation, so your body temperature going down or up if you've eaten late and it's alcohol-y, carby, you sleep hot, so to speak. I told the story of my wife. We did a movie night with the kids. She ate all the homemade popcorn and she slept. Her Whoop told her she was 2.5 degrees hotter that night. She ended up going and sleeping on the couch under the fan.
Man, yeah, that's rough.
Right? So you also increase your cortisol in the PM, which keeps your body in a state of sympathetic fight or flight, which you already mentioned decreases your blood sugar regulation and metabolic rate by up to 30 to 40% that next day.
Yep.
It also affects your appetite and your food cravings, which leads to insulin being elevated with more time in the bloodstream, which then leads to insulin resistance, weight gain or weight stalls or weight regain,
Yeah.
obesity, and those metabolic syndromes.
So you just mentioned decreased metabolic burn rate and efficiency the next day. But remember, if you got a poor night's sleep tonight, how do you think you're going to feel tomorrow? You're going to feel like you're naturally calorically restricting tomorrow, or are cravings up and you're likely bringing in more food, more calories, more craveable, palatable foods. So it's likely that you're actually doing the opposite because of the way that you're feeling. When your body's prepared to, it's the exact opposite of being prepared for that extra load, calorically speaking. So then you're immediately, not only is your body already prone and primed to store fat tomorrow, but then you may be very likely to make the decisions that are going to even drive that further. So that's really rough. You're pouring gasoline on the fire when you just want to put that fire out.
And here's a couple of the stats just to show how sleep impacts glucose, insulin, and metabolism. We've mentioned them, but I want to make sure it's really clear for the I need to know folks. I'm one of them, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, tell me the why so I can understand it, and then I'm much more likely to go do it, right?
Sure.
And I fought the sleep thing, man. It's a constant battle.
Mm-hmm.
So in '99, there was a small laboratory study that found that sleeping just 4 hours per night for 6 nights could play havoc on metabolic and endocrine functions, increasing the time it took for blood glucose to be cleared, reducing the rate of glucose clearance and ultimately insulin sensitivity by 40%, and the glucose response by 30%.
Wow.
There's a study in both men and women. Even one single night of 4 hours of sleep reduced insulin sensitivity in healthy men and women by 19 to 25%.
Wow.
Sleep quality in another study found that poor sleep quality and going to bed later were linked to higher blood glucose levels and worse blood sugar control after meals the next day.
Yep.
So the large epidemiological studies have repeatedly found that people who are chronically sleep deprived are at higher risk of obesity. We see this in the frontline worker studies and the shift worker studies.
Oh, absolutely.
And the problem is you're not getting into those stages of 1 to 3 in non-REM sleep.
Right.
So you're not getting that slow wave sleep that helps with the metabolic, hormonal, and neurophysiological changes. So it's not allowing your body to get out of the fight or flight and get into the rest and digest. Mm-hmm. So that's where we see the metabolic changes in, one night of reduced sleep can increase the inflammatory response. Shortened sleep can cause the brain to decrease its glucose usage because it typically uses 20 to 25% of the body's glucose at rest. Mm-hmm. But that's even going to come down with a poor night of sleep.
Right.
There was another study that showed 11% increase in visceral fat accumulation.
Wow.
A meta-analysis in 2019 found that compared to normal sleepers, short sleepers were hungrier and ate an average of 250 more calories over the course of the day.
Of course. Been there. 250. I mean, you could double that.
Right?
Maybe. So, the nice thing to know is that these effects don't just stay, like you can change the outcome by prioritizing a night's sleep, and then you can reverse these problems that come about after the one night sleep. It typically takes 1 to 3 nights to get back to baseline in most of these studies, like after this. So, one night of good sleep afterwards, you're usually, cutting back on the deleterious effects, and you're getting back to baseline. Usually by the second night, that's typically enough. Sometimes it requires a third night. But the thing about that is knowing that if you have those unavoidable times and a poor night's sleep is like that's just going to be what the deal is right now. Prioritizing it over the next few days is worth the effort. It's worth it physiologically. It's worth it brain activity wise. And it's just worth it for overall how many days. Like we talk a lot about progress over perfection and the 80% rule. So if you were looking at 80%, you're looking at those, 24 days out of a month to try to shoot for good choices, good food choices, good fasting windows. Make that your fasting or your sleep intentions too. If you had 6 nights that were pretty bad, then
Yep.
focusing on the rest of the days is going to be very, very helpful.
And the reality is just the sleep quality predicts weight loss success. So
Mm.
both the amount and quality of sleep are linked to how much weight people lose during lifestyle interventions, so adopting a fasting lifestyle. So, and it's pretty clear those getting at least 7 hours of good quality sleep are 33% more likely to succeed in losing weight compared to those who sleep less. So,
Absolutely. That makes
if
sense.
you are struggling with weight loss plateaus or regain or consistent fasting efforts, sleep may be the potential missing link.
Mm.
And this happened way back in the day when I was on the functional medicine journey to figure out, oh, it must be my testosterone. Maybe it's my hormones. Like I hired a very expensive, well-known functional nutritionist here in Houston, and we were gearing up for a vacation, an anniversary vacation. And I was like, all right, I've got a goal. And my wife and I were doing this together. And if I had a poor night of sleep, I already knew that the scale was either going to be the same or go up from the day previous.
Yeah.
I didn't even have to weigh in. I just knew. So tell me, what do we do about this?
Well, I think the first thing to do is to just kind of take stock. Like, think back the last few nights. Like, how has it been? How has your sleep been? Is there room for improvement? Are you more on the I'm wearing sleep as a badge of honor, or have you been doing that lately, or has it been more intentional? Because depending on where you find yourself, that would be helpful to determine what the next lever to pull is. If you find yourself more on like the badge of honor, then I would just spend a few minutes today thinking about, would it be worth it? Why would it be worth it to prioritize sleep at least a couple of nights this week? Like, could you do it tonight? Start there. Because if you've been struggling at all and you find yourself wearing sleep or lack of sleep as a badge of honor, then you probably have the most room for improvement. If you can, look at the evidence, maybe read through a couple of article summaries, and just maybe re-listen to what some of these things were that resonated with you today, and then take those into account for tonight. And then also look back at the last few days and maybe the last week of your fasting results or your weight loss results. What has the scale done? Take a real objective view of what the scale has done versus what your sleep has been. And if you'll probably notice that the two, like you were talking about, Scott, that the two are correlated with each other. Quality sleep generally tends to lead to control over the scale and positive results on the scale.
And control over your fasting and food choices too.
Exactly. And they all go hand in hand. So if you find yourself that you're already being very intentional with your sleep and that you don't feel like there's much room for improvement, which there usually is something that we can still continue to do better. But if you find yourself doing that, then also look at your results while your sleep has been good and intentional. Do you see that you're maintaining a level of control over the scale? If not, you still might be able to benefit from a little bit longer sleep, or maybe consider a sleep wearable device to actually show you what your sleep quality is. Because even if you're getting 7.5, 8.5 hours, if it's not at the right time for your body, or your eating windows are still a bit later in the day, which can be sleep disruptive, then you might find yourself not getting the optimal quality sleep, which then is still going to lead to some of the same issues, maybe to a lesser extent, but some of those reduced fat oxidation efficiencies and other things that we talked about today. Even though it feels like I'm getting sufficient sleep, it might not be the sleep quality that you could be getting. So that could be another really, really good lever for you.
So how this shows up in my life, if you want the benefits of balanced cortisol and blood sugar regulation and proper growth hormone for muscle growth and leptin and ghrelin hunger signals to be in check, the things that really cue me into knowing when I'm off, for me in a real life application, is I notice that like my energy tends to drop between the 1 and 3 p.m. range if I didn't have a good night's sleep the night before.
Yeah.
I also find myself not being as sharp, so like brain fog.
Yep.
Some random rare bouts of fatigue and hunger that I typically don't experience when my sleep's been good.
Yeah.
So these are a few things that might lend some insight into, trying to get, the reins on the objective view of where your sleep is.
Yeah.
Because we'll give you some action steps now. We'll just go through them quick. We have a sleep guide as well that highlights a lot of this stuff in how to rebuild your sleeping muscle or your sleeping skill set.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why we dedicated multiple episodes over the years to this. But this is something that we probably should talk about more. And we talk a lot about it inside of the coaching and during the challenges. We have a whole day dedicated towards it.
Yeah.
But the reality is, it's a learned behavior. So if it's a behavior, it can be changed.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's not part of your identity of wearing no sleep, or this is just who I am, or yada, yada, yada. Insert.
It's a habit.
It's a habit, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to aim for at least 7 hours of sleep per night. Hopefully by this point up until the episode, you now know the why behind and the how behind from just a broad physiological standpoint of what happens with poor sleep. But here's some things that you can do. Set a regular bedtime and wake up time. So inconsistent sleep timing can be one of the things that can raise insulin resistance and then have that whole host of cascade of physiological things that we've already talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do have a work week that doesn't allow you to get a lot of sleep, like this last week for me, then plan on getting a little bit of that back over the weekend.
Okay.
So try to make up for it if you can. Like to your point, Tommy, is like have a plan. Like take stock of where you're at.
Mm-hmm. And they oftentimes will say, we'll hear this, that you can't make up for a poor night's sleep, or you can't you can't put in a nap and make up for like if you had an hour-long nap but you only had 6 hours, it doesn't get you back to 7. That's true. And what we actually see is that you can make up for at least probably around half of whatever that sleep inefficiency or sleep deficit is. So it's worth the effort to do, absolutely. So don't just shove it off because you heard that you can't make up for it. No, it's worth doing for sure.
But a consistent bedtime and wake up routine. That's a lever you can pull.
Mm-hmm.
Avoid eating dinner close to bedtime and avoid those snacks after meals, right? If you have a dinner window, because we know that physiological response with insulin resistance and insulin sensitivity at night, it's going to impair your melatonin to rise and your cortisol to fall, so you can actually get restful sleep.
Yeah, and the more insulin resistance you have, the more that's a huge lever. Even if you haven't been pulling that, or maybe wanting to admit that might be beneficial for you. I love now a 5 p.m. dinner versus I would have never said that 5+ years ago.
Right.
But yeah, my sleep is going to be double. I'm going to feel twice as rested probably tomorrow.
Yep. A couple other things that we hear often and things that I've struggled with personally. Caffeine. So keep in mind what you eat can also affect your sleep. So I have a 10-hour rule with caffeine now. Okay. I don't consume caffeine 10 hours before my bedtime.
Wow.
Because there's a half-life of caffeine that can disrupt your sleep. Alcohol is a huge one. That's no longer an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
So alcohol can disrupt your sleep. Spicy foods are known to be sleep disruptors for some. And sugar. So refined processed foods and sugar. These are things that can disrupt. So keep in mind those decisions you're making later in the day.
Yeah.
And I love this next one, and this is on our sleep guide, is a good night's sleep starts the morning before. So light routine. This is something that I've implemented over the last probably year or so.
Mm-hmm.
Sleep habits are affected by sunlight and darkness. The circadian biology, the chronotype, the sleep chronotype. I used to think it was woo-woo, but then I looked into it and I was like, oh crap, there I am. That's me.
Yeah.
So getting outdoors to get some sunshine and sunlight, and Dr. Huberman talks about this too, 8 to 15 minutes without lenses, get some dawn and dusk sunlight into your eyes, even if it's overcast. And then when the sun sets here in this house, we dim the lights. You can see I'm wearing the yellow glasses to block the blue light from the devices because I'm on them all day because that's what I do.
Mm-hmm.
I work from this desk. I've got multiple screens. We have a digital coaching company. We work in fasting business and podcasts. We work on our phones all the time.
Yep.
So I am really focused on, we don't have a TV in our bedroom. Our devices are on nighttime. They're on do not disturb. They're off. I'm actually lobbying to remove those from the bedroom and actually get an old school alarm clock
I like
right?
it. Yep.
Because that blue light definitely 100% affects insulin and blood sugar regulation, and it also creates um, disrupted sleep patterns.
Yep.
And then set your bedroom up for sleep. So it needs to be cool. It needs to be dark. We have a dog problem where we're working on our third dog getting out of our bed.
Yeah.
We don't have our kids sleep in our bed. They have queen size beds in their rooms very intentionally. If they wake up, we go back to bed with them upstairs.
Mm.
So protect your sleep environment. It needs to be cool. It needs to be dark. The first thing I did when we moved into this house, other than turn on the water, get the Wi-Fi up and rolling, was I said, Megan, we need to figure out a solution for the bedroom because it has 4 bay windows.
Yep.
So we got the Cellcore blackout shades, and then we got curtains
Nice.
because it needs to be dark. We have an air purifier in our bedroom. I made sure that it had a dimmer on it because a lot of them have these lights that come off of it. So there's a dimmer.
Right.
I went as far to put a piece of tape on the baby monitor because that little blue LED saying that it was charged was like a beacon of light. When I go to hotels and I travel, I'm the guy putting the towel behind the door and closing the shades and putting the chair in front to try to minimize that diffuse light because it's been shown to affect your blood sugar metabolism, your blood sugar, your insulin, and your metabolism.
Yep.
And then, Tommy, this last one we talked about right before we hopped on was vigorous exercise or workouts late in the evening or before bed.
Yeah, those can really ramp things up. And then just kind of like fueling up right before bed, those can be sleep disruptive as well. So kind of getting you into a mode of like, releasing adrenaline, releasing cortisol, getting into a fight or flight. Those can be disruptive to the natural, like, hey, we're getting into circadian rhythm. We're getting into a sleep state, a transitional sleep state here soon, right? So avoiding those if you can, if that's the only time that you can do it, be as early as you can and even a little bit less duration so that you have a little more time, just like that buffer after dinner would make the most sense. And, heck, even if you were going to take some of those workouts and if you had been prioritizing dinner, like having dinner after the workouts, maybe that's a good day to skip one or the other. Maybe instead of putting them both, so you don't have this disruptor from the workout and a disruptor from the food. Maybe you just have one of those before bedtime would be helpful. So try that out, and then note, like, when you wake up the next morning or at some point during the next day, write down a few notes about how you feel, how rested did you feel. Almost like a little bit of a sleep journal, but it only takes a few minutes, and then you can kind of correlate what did I do versus how did I feel.
Yep, absolutely. So if you've been struggling with consistent fasting efforts, or if you've hit the dreaded weight loss plateau, or if you're struggling with the regain train, cravings, hunger the following day, sleep is so utterly important in long-term weight loss sustainability, and the research is clear on it. So we have the resources in the show notes. We have a sleep guide that kind of outlines some of the levers that you can pull. And for some of you, you just need a consistent sleep time and sleep routine, like a bedtime routine. And we do this with our kids when we were sleep, air quotes, training them, right, to be good sleepers. We had a routine. So every night, my son goes up between 7:30 and 7:45. We do 15 minutes of red light. We do supplements. Pajamas are on, and then boom, we divide and conquer. My wife takes the little guy, I take the big kids, we go read. We have a routine. Then they turn on their Yodos. We listen to the daily podcast on the Yodo. We have a routine every single night in prepping their bodies to go to sleep. Well, guess what? As adults, we have the decision making to make decisions that hurt our sleep, like all of the things we mentioned, not consistent bedtimes, caffeine, food, alcohol, workouts, warm bedrooms, light, screens, all of that stuff. We just need to put a little time and attention to that. So if you're looking for some guidance, go to the show notes, grab the sleep guide, and just pick one or two things and implement them over the next 7 to 14 days. Take stock of where you are. And this is such a key important for me personally, but also for our mission here at Fasting for Life, which is to allow people to get the results, lose the weight, and get healthy once and for all with a sustainable method in mind, Tommy. So
Absolutely.
as you wrap up today, man, I appreciate the conversation as always, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks. Bye.
So, you've heard today's episode, and you may be wondering, where do I start? Head on over to thefastingforlife.com and sign up for our newsletter, where you'll receive fasting tips and strategies to maximize results and fit fasting into your day-to-day life.
While you're there, download your free Fast Start guide to get started today. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Fasting for Life.